Nice to see a new group here today, and you're just as packed out as you were last time. It's great. Some of you may find it surprising that when I was a freshman in college, I had the same opportunities that you all have. Many people feel like the feminists have just won all kinds of rights and privileges for us, and that in the dark ages we didn't have those opportunities. Well, it's not so. When I was a freshman, I had almost every opportunity that you all have today. And when I was a freshman, I was asked to write a term paper on what I wanted to do with my life. And it seemed like a really easy assignment to me because I had thought about that since I was a little girl, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And so I wrote the paper, how that I wanted to be a wife and a mother and to marry a godly man and to raise my children for God, and just a simple little paper. Well, I raised a lot of static, even at that time. Girls would say to me, "What's the matter with you? Don't you want to accomplish anything? I mean, you just want to get settled with a man and a house and a bunch of kids, and, well, I'm going to have a career. I'm going to travel. I'm going to have things. I'm going to have a nice car. And they would go what they were going to accomplish because they had chosen a much higher calling. They were going to have a career. It's going to pay them a lot of money. Well, even though my goal was to marry a godly man, and my goal was to focus on that marriage and to raise children for God, many things came into my life that I did not anticipate. I didn't go looking for. I hadn't planned. In my dream, I just dreamed of this little place that I called Mockingbird Hill. And it was just a little house on a hill, and it was very simple, and my life was very simple. Well, God brought a lot of things that I could never have anticipated. We've enjoyed 20 summers here now at the summit, being able to minister here to young people. I've raised 3 children, and together we've had a lot of opportunities to watch them grow and develop and to be excited about what God is doing in each one of their lives. I've helped my husband come to the very top of his profession, and that's been a very exciting thing as I've seen him climb into the position of world renown in what he does and does so well. I've had the opportunity, because of his business and other things, of traveling through 45 foreign countries and also 49 states on 5 continents. Each time I've gone out, I've thought, I want to see what's the most beautiful thing that God or man has created in that place. And so I've gotten out the encyclopedias and National Geographics and studied and planned. And as I've gone out, this search has taken me many, many places. I've gone from the top of the Statue of Liberty to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I parasailed off Hawaii, all over the Pacific, and what a beautiful thing to be 400 feet up over that blue water and looking out at those mountains around you. I've gone gliding here in the Rockies, and what a thrill when I went with a fellow who had just graduated from the Air Force Academy, and he was going to show me a few things. So after we got up, and he began to show me how to steer the plane, and then he said, "Oh, you got it. This is not enough fun. Let's have some fun." And we began to turn somersaults. I was cured for life of going gliding. I've enjoyed a tranquil moment in Tokyo, Japan, as I've sat with the Japanese lady in her garden having a ceremonial tea. And what a thrill that was to be in that part of the world. My husband and I were serenaded by gondoliers in a canal in Venice, Italy. And this was a thrilling thing and a beautiful thing to experience. I visited that incredible lost city of the Incas, Machu Picchu in Peru. And as we climbed up over that Andes mountain and looked down over that city, it was absolutely awesome and breathtaking, and the wonder of how it was ever made. I climbed to the top of the Mount of Olives and looked down on the eastern gates of the city of Jerusalem. And I thought about how precious that piece of real estate was to God, and how maybe that's the most beautiful thing in all the world, the city of Jerusalem. So many times I would say, is this it? Is this it? Is this the most beautiful thing in the world? I'm not sure. I'm going to look some more. Maybe I'll still find it. I've held the hand of a dying saint, someone who was going into eternity. And as I did, and I realized there was a death angel in that room waiting to carry that soul into eternity. That is an awesome and a beautiful thing, to have that link with eternity, to be present in such a thing. Climbed on the Great Wall of China, and I studied how that came to be built and how that was the only man-made thing that the astronauts could see from outer space. And what a magnificent thing, even though it was built at great suffering and great cost to many people. Watched the majestic launching of a spacecraft in Florida, and as that fire belched from the sides and that boom, and the ground shook under it and soared into the heavens, I thought, now that is beautiful. Not just to see it, but to realize that there were millions of people who contributed to that. There were engineers and there were scientists that go way back who added and added more information and more knowledge until that successful launch was built and was achieved. I've scuba dived in the Bahamas, and then one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen visually was on the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. I hope all of you get a chance to go there and see what God has placed under the waters for us to discover and to enjoy. Throughout Europe, we enjoyed the architecture and the literature and the geography and the history and every art of Europe. What a thrill to tour Europe. Skied on a glacier, and I've come down with the flowers blooming on both sides and looked down over the alpine lakes below me. And that's a beautiful and a thrilling thing to participate in. Well, I'll just tell you some of these things to tell you that I have some idea of what is beautiful, because I've experienced so much beauty in my life. But it wasn't until I attended my parents' 50th wedding anniversary that I discovered what the most beautiful thing in all the world was. We had just had a barbecue, and all my relatives were there, my aunts and uncles and cousins and nieces and nephews, and the entire clan was together in my brother's backyard. And as we finished eating, we pulled back our chairs and pulled out sprouts and blankets, and the children started playing with the puppies, and the teenagers were playing volleyball. And then pretty soon my dad said he had some things to share with us, and he began to talk, he and Mom, about how God had provided for them as they raised their 7 children, and how through many difficult and many wonderful times God had just sustained and had taken care of all their needs. And then as the younger people talked about the future, and as we just interacted and we discussed life and we discussed and we shared, I just said, I can't believe this. I searched the world for the most beautiful thing, and here it is in my own backyard. Right here, there's nothing more beautiful than this anywhere. The family functioning as God intended that a family should function. Every society has been known to have families. It's in the instincts of man. Every time archaeologists dig, they find a remnant of a family there, because God just placed that in us, the need to have family. After we had that happy family reunion, I found even a better reason to believe that a family is the most beautiful and the most wonderful thing in all the world. After that reunion, we had tragedy strike our family. In a period of 2.5 years, we lost 4 of our immediate family members, my brothers and sisters, brother-in-law and sister-in-law, through accidents and through illness. And one by one, as like 4 or 5 months would pass and then another one would hit us, we would get together and we would talk about it, we would grieve together, we would share in this suffering, we would try to comfort and help that one who was most closely touched by the thing that had come into our life. I found the verse in the Bible that said, Proverbs 17:17. A brother is born, a brother or sister is born for the day of adversity. And I think that is the key to the siblings, the key to family, is that God has given us a Social Security program. The day of adversity is not just for the fun and games. And if it's possible, I think every individual should have more than one child if God gives them children, because they're launched into life alone if you're an only child. But if you've got brothers and sisters, you have that person that's there for the day of adversity. Well, 4 months after the last death, my father had a massive stroke. And here he was, this man who raised cattle and could throw a bale of hay 10 feet in his 70s, and very healthy, strong man, suddenly had this paralyzing stroke. And he lay on his bed for 6.5 years, only able to move really his right arm. And as we watched him there, we kept saying to God, God, take him, go ahead, take him. But it wasn't God's timing, and it wasn't for him to do as yet. And my mother went every day, and I watched modeled what marriage commitment is all about. When it says sickness and in health, for better, for worse. And I watched modeled day after day after day as Mama went down there, made sure he was taken care of, read the paper, caught him up on all the news, entertained him every way she could, brought other people in to talk with him, and made his life so much more pleasant than it would have been. I realized that that's really what marriage is all about. It's not just for the good times. Well, my dad died finally after 6.5 years, and the funeral was just a time of celebration. We were just so delighted that God had finally relieved him from that body. And he always was a wonderful singer, and he loved to sing. And finally, he had his voice back, and he could sing again. And we were just so thrilled that God had taken him. We buried him on a Wednesday. Thursday was Thanksgiving. The next day, I decided to do a little shopping, so I asked Mom if she wanted to go to the mall, and she said, no, I'll just wait. When you get back, you can take me to visit some of my friends. And I went to the mall to do a little shopping. When I came back, I found that God had taken my mother also. And so within 1 week, we were to bury our mom and our dad. But you know, at the time, I was so shocked, and I thought, how could this happen? Mom was so healthy, and we had all these plans for her. My nephew came over that night, and we were trying to figure out all of the ins and outs of this, and he said, Aunt Carole, I understand it completely. I know exactly what happened. He said, Grandpa went to heaven. He looked around a couple of days, and he said, God, this is wonderful. I love it. I just love it up here. But you know, I never go anywhere without Mary. And something's missing. Could we send for Mary? And God said, well, her work's done. We might as well let her come on up too. And so he brought him up for them to be together. And after 61 years of marriage, they were reunited again. I've seen different aspects of the family unit in many parts of the world. And each time I have tried to analyze and say, now what am I seeing demonstrated in that family? When I was in Turkey, I saw this little one-room house, little frame house. We wouldn't have called it anything. But this little house that this man had just completed building. And he was putting the step on the front door, at the front door. And as he did, I saw his wife and his children. And they were there watching him. And I saw in their face such admiration and such appreciation that this wonderful man had built this wonderful house for us. And how smart he is and how wonderful. And I just read into their faces these wonderful thoughts that were going on. And that's families there for appreciation. It's there to understand the contributions we make and to appreciate them. Recently, my 12-year-old niece started running her very first track meet. And she was nervous about it. She lives about 40 miles away. And so we thought, well, we should send some of the family over to watch this race. So I babysat with my 3 grandbabies, and some of the others drove over. Lauren was one of them that went, and Curtis, and drove over to watch the track meet. Well, she was running, or I have a video of the whole thing, so I didn't really miss it, but I wasn't there. And as she's coming along, she's running second. I mean, she's a late second. She's way behind the first place. The girl who's in first place has never, ever lost a race. She's been running forever. That's her mother's thing for her. And so she runs everywhere. And so Devin is way behind. And all of a sudden, on the video, you can hear Lauren, my daughter-in-law, Lauren is saying, "Go, Devin, go!" And she goes like this. She recognizes that voice, and she shifts gears, and it looked like she got shot out of a rocket. She took off, and she passed that first place girl and came in first. And I just watched that video, and I've seen it over and over. I said, you know, that is what family is all about. She knew somebody appreciated what she was about to do, and it was worth that extra effort to accomplish that. She ended up running that first race, first mile in 7.01, and that's pretty good if you know track for a little girl. When our sons were in track, my husband used to place us at stations around the track every time they'd have a meet. And every time they'd turn a corner, one of us was there screaming. And they did better when we were there. And the people do better when someone's there to appreciate, to correct, to pray, to observe what's going on in another individual's life and to care. In India, we were in Bombay, that most impoverished city where people literally live on the sidewalks, where in the morning the street cleaners come to clean up because they use it for their restrooms in the night. I have no idea how they survive. I have no idea how they survive. Millions of people. And we were going along in a taxi through the streets of Bombay, and I saw a lady, an Indian lady in a sari standing very erect, and the sari was all tattered, and she had it kind of pulled about her face, and she was looking down at the sidewalk where her husband and children were all lined up sitting along the curb, along the sidewalk. And as I stood there and looked at her and sat in that car, and I said, this is something that I see in her face, another aspect of what the family is all about. It was like, you know, we don't have anything. We have absolutely nothing. but we have each other. We're still together. We're together. And there was a dignity that I own something. I have something. I have my family. And things will get better. I know they will. We'll survive because we're together. And that's one of the aspects of family. When life is all boiled down to its essence, all you got left is God and family. And that's why it's so important to build that family in the God-ordained way. The family was designed to meet a child's physical, emotional, social, and spiritual needs. And they're built-in lifetime rewards if you do this in the right way. You reap from what you've sown the rest of your life, whether you do it right or you do it wrong. The world's getting mixed messages today as to what is a family. Even the very definition of family has gone crazy. What is a family? What is expected of you as you establish a family? Talked with many older women who chose the careers, and today they're saying, I made a wrong choice. I didn't do it the right way. I wish I could go back. I wish I could do it over again. But now it's too late. There are different models for the family. I'm going to cover 3 of them for you, and I think it kind of covers in total almost any model that you could come up with as we condense these to 3. The number 1, the first one, is the communist lifestyle and model of family. People in communist China would give anything if they were able to have children and have a home the way we have today. The communists know that values are taught in the home, and they cannot leave that child in that home because they cannot instill their doctrines in them if they're left with their parents. My Chinese guide, after I'd spent a few days with her, she expressed to me how she had one little boy. He was 5 years old. She was never allowed to have any more children. If she were to get pregnant, she would have to be forcibly taken into the hospital and the baby aborted. In communist China, if someone finds out someone else is pregnant and doesn't tell on them, then they're guilty and they can be sent to prison themselves because they didn't tell. There's a spy system to make sure you only have one child. In America, we have this wonderful privilege. You can have all the children you want to have. What a privilege that God has given to us, and we don't even appreciate it. The communist model was condensed in a little article called the Young Socialist Alliance. In November of '69, it was so well that I just saved this. And this is what it said. Over time, it is reasonable to expect that monogamous marriages, and that's man and woman, and the nuclear family, man, woman, and child, will wither away along with the other institutions carried over from the class society. Children in the socialist society will not belong to one set of biological parents, but will look upon all adults as their mothers and fathers. In turn, adults will view them as children of the whole community. During the years they require extensive care, training, and affection, the children will be raised by professionals who choose to specialize in such work, unquote. The second model of the family is and I have to take the questions afterward.
I just wanted to repeat
It's from the Young Socialist Alliance publication, November of '69. The second one is there's a humanist, feminist, or liberal lifestyle or family model. The liberal controlled media has latched onto this one, and this is the one that's the more threatening to us today than the communist model in this country. It's a very loose definition of family. They will say such things as those who share the same kitchen are family, or those who live together for a period of time are family. And they have a very loose definition. They have launched an unnatural attack on the family unit. They have placed this attack within the textbooks, within the media, within television, and ads, on billboards, magazines. Almost anywhere you look, you will see there's an attack on the traditional family unit. They present the immoral lifestyle as that is normal, and that is what everyone should be looking toward. They encourage young people to sidestep marriage commitment and motherhood or fatherhood and commitment to those children. You're encouraged to just look to the world system for your fulfillment. And I have a little booklet here that I was looking for some books for my grandchildren. They're 1, 3, and 4 years old, so they're little tykes. And I found this golden book. It says, "What will I be?" And as I looked through this book, I was looking to see what are the goals they're giving to young girls. I want to see what careers they're opening up to them. And this is what is in this little book. There's not one picture of a girl with her family, with her husband, with her children, not one. Instead, in this book, she's a bike racer, a bricklayer, a fireman, a mechanic, a champion diver, a rock climber, a concert pianist, and the engineer of a train. This is not an isolated case. The traditional roles are being systematically stripped from our textbooks and from our books for children. The feminists have several specific things in mind for us, for women, and for our families. I've testified before government hearings. I've debated also feminists, and I've found that they're just shocked to think that anyone would think the family has that much significance. They're shrill voiced. They're insulting. They say the only thing that matters is you and your own career and your own fulfillment. And if you're fulfilled, then everybody around you is going to be happy. And the family is strictly secondary. The liberal model of family introduces destructive competitiveness between men and women, a downgrading of motherhood and of homemaking. They formed an organization that I just love the name of it. I mean, it was definitely named appropriately. They named it the National Organization of Women, but being lazy, like we all are, they've just shortened it to NOW. And so they call it NOW. If you've ever been around children, you know that a spoiled child's favorite word is now. I want it, and I want it now. And I don't really care about the consequences, and I don't care whether it's right or wrong. Just give it to me, and give it to me now. They're like pranksters who went into a department store and stayed behind it after it was locked one night, and they switched all the tags in the store. And so the $10,000 ring was $1.99, and the little scarf, cheap scarf, was $10,000. Everything was turned around. Their values are so messed up because what is really important they have no value, and what is of very little value they consider very important. Their main thrust for 10 years was the passage of what they called the Equal Rights Amendment. We fought it and finally won. But the things that it would have accomplished with its passage are still the goals of the feminists, and they're accomplishing them one by one. As I go through some of their ideas for us, I want you to understand that had the Equal Rights Amendment passed, each one of these things would have been law with its passage. But instead, they're coming one by one by one. They believe that male and female are basically interchangeable. That's a liberal tenet, that we're just the same, men and women are. This is what they would do to us, the feminists, and this role model for women and for family if they as they have their way. Number one, women and men be treated exactly the same in the military. Men resent the lowering of standards so women can pass. They understand that military is not the place for social engineering, but it's a place where the best should come forward because you hope for victory and you want to win. Congress has a right to draft women, but chooses not to do so. But the feminists don't like this at all, and they say if for any reason a woman is exempt, very often. When the first prisoner of war came back, I was fascinated to find out that she reported how she'd gotten picked up. And she said, unfortunately she was not badly mistreated apparently, but she said she got on the wrong road and drove right into the enemy's arms. And as she realized that that's what she had done, she tried to make a U-turn and got stuck in the sand. And I said, that's what I would have done. You know, that's typical. 1 in 7 servicewomen today is pregnant at any given time. And 20% of our armed services are women, the highest of any nation in history. In 1988, 4,815 women left the service because they were pregnant. They knew you can't mix roles. And yet we trained them at great taxpayer cost to be equipped to go out and fight battles for us that they have no business being out there fighting. When the war was on with Iraq, we found that many women were being torn from their children. Even nursing mothers were being torn away from their children to go off to battle. Many, even mothers and fathers, were taken from children. And this shouldn't be. This is absolutely wrong. They had hearings in Congress about what they were going to do with these women who were sleeping in the men's tents and using the same latrines with the men over there in battle. I received a letter from a young chaplain during the war there, and he said this. He said, quote, "The vulgarities of military life are worse than ever now with women in the combat units." I hope you will get the book called The Weak Link, The Feminization of the Military by Brian Mitchell if you have any question. It's put out by Regnery Gateway Press, and I will give you a handout the last day as to how to order these things that I'm telling you about. The second thing they will do for us, to us. The enemies of the traditional family will overthrow all state laws concerning sex crimes and domestic relations. Playboy magazine and the prostitutes lobby have contributed heavily to the feminist movement, because they know if the feminists get their way, that there will be no more laws against pornography or against prostitution or against homosexual conduct, because they want that there will be no recognition of moral values within our law system. Privacy in institutions will be wiped out if they have their way. Planned Parenthood is the greatest enemy of the family today. And I hope that you all will become aware of what it is that Planned Parenthood is doing to our nation and to our young people. You can get the book Grand Illusions by George Grant, and it gives from their own materials what their goals and aspirations are and what Planned Parenthood is doing to destroy our country. Their sex education material is totally immoral. It focuses a youth's interest without any morality or guilt on unrestrained sex. It says the only thing wrong with sex is if there is a victim. If there is no victim, then any kind of sex is fine, and just help yourself. And I would be so happy, they would tell you, to give you the little birth control devices that you might want to use, and just help yourself. And what they know also but do not tell you is the more sex education there is, the more unwanted pregnancies there are. They go hand in hand. And so, because nothing is 100%. And the more youth interest is focused on sex, the more it's going to happen, and the more there are going to be mistakes and problems and unwanted pregnancies. But then they'll take care of that too, because they have a nice little clinic where they would just be delighted to murder your baby for you and just get it out of the way. And they have a scalpel for hire. And the very basis of all of this is the love of money, because they're reaping millions and millions of dollars from our young people, and from the fact that they've focused their attention on sex, they've given them the material knowing that it won't be effective, and then they have the abortions for them, and destroying many young lives in the process. They've even shifted their clinics from neighborhood-based to school-based clinics now, so they'll be really, really handy for the young people. According to the Alan Gumacher Institute, who did a study of abortions, it said only 2% of abortions are for rape, incest, or the life of the mother. And that we're told that that's what they're all about. And so we've got to go along with this trend. Number 3, labor laws would be upset. A wife would be equally responsible for the family's debts, his and hers, and could be forced to pay the bills and be made to go to work, because they would like this to happen, because they would like all mothers to be working, so they can take the little children in the federal daycare centers and teach them what they think that those children ought to know, the way they do in China, Russia, Cuba, and the other totalitarian nations. Provisions to protect women in the labor market be wiped out. Like you can't lift but a certain amount of wage. You have to have rest periods. You can't be made to work overtime. All the things that are there to protect women, they're trying to get them removed. They don't want women to be recognized as different in any way than men are. And if any of you tell you that, what the thing is all about is equal pay for equal work, absolutely not true. Since 1963, we have had equal pay for equal work as the law of the land, and you can take anybody to court if you're not being paid for the same or doing the same job. So they have another little thing in mind called comparable worth. They say, well, the labor market is not fair. Free enterprise is not fair, so we're going to set labor wages, scales. What we're going to do is we're going to have somebody sit at a nice little desk and decide what a job is worth. And we think that women's jobs should be paid as much as the men's jobs. So we'll decide maybe the librarian is the same as a truck driver. So they have to pay the librarian the same as they pay the truck driver. Or they try to pick women's jobs, men's jobs, and match them up, and then force through the courts the employee to pay the same to the woman as the man is being paid. And it's just an undermining of our free market economy. Phyllis Schlafly wrote a book called Equal Pay for Unequal Work, which covers comparable worth, and you will have a lot more of this as you go along in school, a lot more discussion about it, because it's becoming right in the forefront now. Equal Pay for Unequal Work by Phyllis Schlafly. Number 4, they oppose prayer and Bible reading in the schools, and yet they want us to hand out the immoral materials from Planned Parenthood. They want to promote a perversion and lifestyle. These child-free units of today are the freeloaders of tomorrow. The ones who are paying for AIDS by the billions of dollars are not the ones who have raised up children who are going to fill the tax rolls to pay these bills. And they would like to see zero population growth and think that raising children is really a rather archaic thing that should be done away with. We have an overpopulation anyway, they would tell us. I know you think that I am probably stretching a point and I am not being accurate. I'm going to just read to you from NOW's resolution that was passed in 1985 in New Orleans. And these are their own words. I'm just going to quote what their goals, their aspirations are, and their values are. Quote, whereas the rights of gay parents, especially lesbian mothers, have always been in jeopardy, and the recent decision of the Massachusetts officials to allow only traditional families to provide foster care to children threatens gains made for lesbian and gay parents and any non-traditional families, whereas legislation that could jeopardize the right of other lesbians and gay men who work with children has been introduced in several states, and the current rise in teen suicides, runaways, and abuse of teens may in part be connected with the lack of support systems for lesbians and gay teens and their families, and the lack of adequate sex education. There is a need for increased visibility of NOW's involvement in lesbian and gay custody cases. NOW shall actively work to repeal state sodomy statutes and urges its state and local chapters to work for adequate and effective sex education programs that present, listen to their sex education programs, that present a positive view of women's sexuality and of lesbianism and homosexuality, and for the development of programs to support lesbian and gay youth, and the overwhelming majority support for legal abortion and birth control. Now has a basic electoral strategy, its primary goal, the election of feminist women and men at all levels of government, and now incorporates child care as an important element of its national agenda by assigning, listen to this, assigning paid staff members to facilitate federal child care legislation and to assist state and local chapters in developing strategies to encourage and support comprehensive quality child care policies, programs, and facilities, unquote. So now that's from their own mouth where they stand in child care and in the perversions. Number 5, the liberal model fights the right to have abortion on demand. They continue to go for the zero population growth. And they say that, you should choose not to reproduce yourself. This is suicide. This is a form of suicide. Your progeny will not continue after you. It's ending with me because I have no hope in the future. I have no faith in God. I have no faith in what is out ahead. It speaks of a large hopelessness that they're engendering in individuals. Many feminists who do have children don't want to have a man involved in the process. I know 2 lesbians who had a little boy. She went down and got inseminated, and they have a little son, Willie, now. And that tragic little boy is being raised by those 2 women. And this is not an isolated incident. They feel that they want the joys of having children, but they don't want to present the family to that child. Liberal magazines continue to release research that they say children do better under daycare than they do under mother care. And wherever that is honest, and there have been a couple honest researchers I've studied, it's when they took children out of a totally impoverished home where there was no stability or family there, placed them in daycare, and they were benefited by it. But it's like, someone has said, it's like saying a sick child does better in the hospital, so let's put all children in the hospital because they'll all be better for it. And that's how twisted their logic is in dismantling the home and placing these children in these places where they're kept as in an orphanage. In too many cases today, the home is like a dormitory where people rush in, take a shower, change their clothes, rush out the door and stop and get a hamburger at McDonald's. And the home is not the place where there's stability and there's comfort and there's a joy of being together. In some of the studies, Time did a study of this issue in fall of 1990. And even Time magazine said children face an array of risks ranging from mild cognitive delays in preschoolers to withdrawal and depression in older kids. Children pressured by aggressive scheduling often show signs of chronic stress, thinking that they're nuisances. discipline becomes lax. Dr. Spock, whom I don't like to quote, but he said, quote, "Parents don't want to spend what little time they have with their children reprimanding them. This encourages children to push limits and test parental authority. Others fear that working women are so overwhelmed by guilt that they don't want to become attached to their child. They just stay detached from them." I read last summer in Family Circle an article about working women and having your children. It says, by all means, go back to work by 6 months, because if you don't, you're going to get too attached to that baby. And we don't want you to do that. So the sooner you go back, the better for you and the baby. And they won't miss you, and you won't miss them. Children are adopting the values of the aggressively materialistic consumer society that they see on television. And instead of being given an identity that ties in with their home and who they are in their family and what they can accomplish, their identity is tied in with what they can purchase, what they own, what kind of clothes they wear, what kind of labels on their seat of their pants, what kind of a stereo set they have, what kind of records they're able to buy. Jesus said, a person's life consists not in the abundance of the things which he possesses, Luke 12:15. Garage sales are vivid reminders to us of what this materialistic culture is leading to, and how many of the things that we buy have absolutely no value in that family, but yet it has taken time away from that child because someone had earned that money to buy that junk that ended up in the garage sale. What children want are time and attention. They don't want what your money buys. They want you. The government cannot raise a generation of civilized children because they're not even allowed to teach morality, family loyalty, mother love, father strength. They're not allowed to teach what God has to say about anything. Anything of faith is just face value day to day, like you teach an animal or a dog that you're taking care of. Proverbs 127:3 says, "Children are a heritage of the Lord." God may not give all of you children. You may not even have the opportunity to have children. But if you do, and if God would entrust you with them, I hope it will be one of your special blessings to allow God to give you those children to raise for him. The challenge we have today is to encourage mothers how to be content with what the husband provides. To be content is one of the most valuable things that we can bring to any relationships. Physically, the contact between parents and children has dropped 40% in the last 25 years. Today, parents maybe spend 10 to 20 minutes a day. Different studies give you 10 minutes or so. One study gave me 7 minutes a week that they're meaningful time with the children. They show that the reality of it is, you say, well, oh, daycare, what's wrong with daycare? No problem with daycare. Everybody knows that babies with babies spreads disease. Physically, those children are at risk. They did a study with 6,000 pediatricians, and of the 2,000 that responded, they said that in daycare, children develop more acute infections than children in home care. And the studies showed that children are 12 times as likely to develop influenza B, which can lead to very serious illness. Other diseases they get in daycare are gastroenteritis from bacteria, viruses, and parasites they pick up from the other children. Psychologically and emotionally, the continual succession of caretakers introduces stresses on those children. It's like first day of school every day because the turnover is so great within the daycare programs. If any of you work in them, you know that that's true. And you can imagine the tension of never knowing what's expected of you exactly. This stress causes anxiety, it causes sleeplessness, it causes digestive problems and hypertension, and inability to concentrate. Dr. John Bauckham did a large study of children in daycare and went through the complications that they end up with that are vast. Spiritually, the child is not taught in a predictable manner. They're not taught, given time to ground them in the Word of God and in the principles that God would have them to have. Spiritually, they're just in a darkness and a no man's land because they're not allowed to be taught as they should. Socially, they're playmates. This is one of the most deadly things of daycare that there is. Those children are not allowed to discriminate. Whomever is in the daycare center is their buddy, their good friend. Some of those children's mothers are single mothers who are very promiscuous. Some of those children see things that you and I have never even seen. And they go back to that school and they can't wait to share with all their little friends how worldly wise they are. And those little children are picking up things that No, the mother and father would never want them to know. But they're not allowed to discriminate from one child to the other because they're just thrown all in together. The family approach to daycare gives the best answer, and yet the government wants to give tax breaks only to those who will put their children in federally registered daycare centers. Not the church centers, not the neighborhood, not the family center, not with the mother, but with the federal placement because they want to encourage all those children to end up in the federal daycare centers. The book, Who Will Rock the Cradle, Phyllis Schlafly compiled, is a collection of essays on this subject in some of the studies that were done in Congress, and I hope you will get that, Who Will Rock the Cradle, maybe down here in the book stand. Harriet Beecher Stowe once said of children, "I felt that God put them into my hands perfectly helpless, and if there's anything difficult or disagreeable in the case, how could I expect to hire a woman for money to be faithful in what I cannot do for love?" Mother and father love is like a magnet that just enfolds a child, wants to protect the child, and if we allow God to nurture that love we have for our children, He gives us the wisdom and the ability to do what needs to be done for that child in that home. And the liberal feminist family model is not one to put the child under focus and the marriage under focus and to have that be your first priority, but it's rather to have the career be your priority, and the children somehow will fit into that pattern. Just push them here and push them there, and at some point they should fit into this. This concludes the feminist model of the family. When we come back, we'll talk about the third model, which is the right model. Thank you very much.